Dave Chappelle is a comedian and an actor. He has earned millions of dollars in movie roles. In fact, he was in the movie Con Air, and if you've ever seen that movie, he doesn't have a very big role in it. But he made $26 million from that movie. But what he is best known for is his television show on Comedy Central, The Dave Chappelle Show. The show was on the air for 2 seasons, but in the middle of production on the 3rd season in 2005, Dave Chappelle walked away. He walked away from $50 million. Now at the time there were many guesses as to what happened. Some said it was drugs, some said he had a nervous breakdown, some said he was sick. But most people said one thing: he's crazy. Who would walk away from $50 million? It's always fascinated me because I read very few stories about people with a lot of money who are content. When I say content, I'm defining it as peace with the lot that you have in your life. In interview after interview, I see people who are driven to achieve more. They aren't satisfied with what they have, or they're worried they're going to lose what they have. John D. Rockefeller said, "The poorest man I know is the man who has nothing but money." Jacob Astor said, "I am the most miserable man on earth." Jacob Astor made millions. Cornelius Vanderbilt, the Vanderbilt fortune, said, "The care of millions of dollars is too great a load. There is no pleasure in it." John B. Rockefeller once said, "I have made many millions, and they have all brought me no happiness." Henry Ford, after making millions of dollars, said, "I was much happier when I was doing mechanics work." What are these people missing? Why is being rich such a burden to them? Isn't being rich supposed to be great? And that's what makes Dave Chappelle so fascinating to me. When he had the chance to make millions, he turned it down. Now, for those of you who don't know, Dave Chappelle actually lives here in Ohio. He lives in Yellow Springs, Ohio, right outside of Xenia. And at a concert in the town back in 2006, not a concert where he was starring, but they asked him to come up on stage, he said, "Turns out you don't need $50 million to live around these parts. Just a nice smile and a kind way about you. You guys are the best neighbors ever. That's why I came back, and that's why I'm staying." And when I read that quote, I thought, well, he's talking about contentment. He's talking about what it means to be content. He lives in a little town in Ohio, and he's happy there. Money, or a substantial sum of money, isn't going to change his ability to be content. Money does not play a role in it. Well, as we concluded our train trip vacation last week, one of the passages from our New Testament daily readings was in Philippians, and in it, Paul is writing to the Philippian church. Paul doesn't write anything without a reason. He always had a purpose in what he was writing. In all of Paul's letters, he is, for the most part, saying, you got this problem in your church, and here is how to solve it. Obviously, money was an issue for every church because it comes up in several of his letters. In Philippians 4:11 and 12, it says, "I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want." In an interview with David Letterman in June, Dave Chappelle finally talked about his decision to turn down $50 million. And it's a fascinating discussion. If you have a chance to see the whole thing, it's really an interesting discussion about what he went through and the decision that he made. As I listened to David Letterman and Dave Chappelle talk, there are a couple things that stand out to me. And the first is this statement from Dave Chappelle. He says, "Money is not the end-all, be-all. There are other things in my life that I did not purchase with money that are very valuable to me." Now here's a small portion of that interview with David Letterman.
And there's a negotiation, a renegotiation, and they said, here, we're going to guarantee you an enormous sum of money to continue doing the show because it's so successful. And then, apparently you agreed to it, and then where did he go? The show stopped and never came back. And like you said, 7 years later, you're just late for work. So what a decision was made. You made a decision.
Oh yeah, I made a series of decisions. Uh,
Do you regret saying, I don't want this enormous sum of money?
well, okay, look, Dave. It's very hard to go through something like this because no one's really done it before. So there's not too many people that don't think I'm crazy, right? So I look at it like this. I'm in a restaurant with my wife. It's a nice restaurant. We're eating dinner. I look across the room. I say, you see this guy over here across the room? He has $100 million. And we're eating the same entree. So, okay, fine. I don't have $50 million or whatever it was. Let's say I have $10 million in the bank. The difference in lifestyle is minuscule. The only difference between having $10 million and $50 million is an astounding $40 million. Of course I would like to have that money.
Well, you're right, it's 40 million is the difference. And how do you feel with doing what you felt you needed to do?
The very complicated answer. Money is the fuel for choices. Money gives me choices. So that's not nothing, it's something. I can choose when I want my kids to go to school. I can choose what I want to eat in a given day. It's not the end, but it's not the end all be all. There are other things in my life that I did not purchase with money that are very valuable.
That's right. And let's just say you had the 40 million. Who's to say you would be a happier or better person?
I think I might be a happier person. I don't know. There's no way of knowing.
I think one of the most revealing parts of this interview is when Dave Chappelle admits he had no one he could talk to about this decision. There was nobody he could go to. How many people, when offered millions of dollars, turn it down? No one. At least not that you can think of offhand. Now, I did think of someone. Pat Tillman was a football player who left the NFL and millions of dollars behind to fight in Iraq, and he was eventually killed by friendly fire. But he left millions of dollars behind. To me, Dave Chappelle is in search of contentment, and I still think, watching that interview, that he is still in search of contentment. He discovered that $50 million wasn't the answer. It might make him happy, as he said, but will it make him content? Remember what he said, money is not the end-all, be-all. There are other things in my life that I did not purchase with money that are very valuable to me. As we traveled across the country by train, it was almost like having a front seat on America, because we got to watch all this passing by our window as we went and traveled from Chicago all the way to LA and then up the coast, the Pacific coast to Seattle and back to Chicago again. And as I was looking out the window at all these different homes, big homes, small homes, slums, ghettos, to places out in the Midwest where there's just, as far as the eye can see, there are farm fields or ranches everywhere, I wondered, are these people content? As we went through Chicago and saw all the spray painting and we're in some of the worst sections of the city, and we're inside the train looking out, I'm thinking, are the people living here content? And then we get into Chicago and I pick up a newspaper and 7 people were killed there overnight, murdered overnight in some of those same neighborhoods that we rode the train through. And I think, how can you be content in that situation? We go out to the Midwest and we're going through fields in Kansas and Colorado. These fields, as far as the eye can see. And I'm thinking, are the farmers, the ranchers, are they content? Are their children content with living out here in the middle of what seems like nowhere? Then we get down in New Mexico and we see actual homes built out of mud and sticks. And then we see homes of millionaires that are supposed to look like they're built out of mud and sticks because they want to try to fit in, and yet the satellite dish on top and the big RV in the front yard sort of give it away. But I wonder, are these people content? Because I even thought about those millionaires building these homes to look like they're built out of mud and sticks. Clearly, they're wanting to look like something that they're not. Contentment. Then we get to LA, and it takes us almost an hour to get from the train station to our hotel. If that trip was done in Ohio, we'd probably be there in 20 minutes. But in LA, you can't get anywhere without traffic. That's not a joke. It's the truth. And I didn't even want to look out the window because I didn't even want to deal with it. And I'm thinking, are these people sitting in traffic day after day after day, are they content? I met an oil man in North Dakota, had dinner with him one night. He left his family in Michigan to make the big bucks in the new oil country of North Dakota. He was traveling back home to Michigan with his son, who he wouldn't see again for a couple of more months. His job is dangerous. It's dirty, but he makes a lot of money. Is he content? Experts say we spend almost 50% of our time thinking about money. Debt, jobs, the economy, healthcare, the labor market. It's all around us. It becomes the top priority in our lives, the top priority in the news. We spend our time thinking about how to get it, how to keep it, how to spend it, how to save it, and how to get more of it. And it can be all-consuming. Now, money itself is not a bad thing. Even Dave Chappelle admits this. Money allows him to make choices. But choice is not contentment. I believe we all want contentment. We all want to feel fulfilled. We want to be self-sufficient. We don't want to be restless and wondering if there's something better out there. I believe that God is calling us to contentment. But that contentment is found in something greater. Just as in Philippians, Paul speaks in his first letter to Timothy in chapter 6 on the same subject. And here I believe Paul answers the question as to whether it is possible to be rich and be content, to be richly content. In 1 Timothy 6:6, he begins with, "But godliness with contentment is great gain." Now we read the word godliness, and the first thing I think of is self-righteousness. Oh, you think you're so great. You just think you're wonderful. They're the ones who point out the faults of everybody else and yet I act like a hypocrite. Those are the people we don't like. But that's not what this godliness is talking about. Instead, verse is referring to true godliness. It is treasuring God in our hearts so much that nothing else matters. Notice little g. So much that God is in our hearts, so much that nothing else out there matters. And we find our contentment in God. The Greek philosopher Epicurus once said, "The secret of contentment is not to add to a man's possessions, but to take away his desires." It's not to add to our possessions, but take away our desires. How does that happen? It's when we turn our focus toward God. If we're seeking God, we're trying to be more like Christ and less like the world. If everything we do is focused on what it means to walk in the Spirit, our hearts are going to be filled with God, and that is godliness. Paul is telling us if we love money, we will never find contentment because we're pursuing something we will never find. Think about what Dave Chappelle said. Or maybe think about what Dave Chappelle didn't say. It seems obvious to me that he still struggles with the decision he made. He is still on a search for contentment. And the Greek word translated contentment here in this verse means a mind contented with its lot. In other words, you are rich when you are content. There's a story told of a millionaire who was on his deathbed, and his family came to his bed to say goodbye, and then waited outside his room as a doctor and lawyer attended to him. It wasn't long before he died, and the doctor and lawyer finally left the room, and as they walked out, the family was all really curious. How much money did he leave? The lawyer looked at them with surprise. He left everything. He didn't take anything with him. It takes a second to realize that's exactly what Paul says. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. This is one of those verses that's become a common cliche. You can't take it with you. Theologian William Barclay makes a wonderful point about this in his Daily Study Bible. He said, "It's not that Christianity pleads for poverty. It's not that the goal of Christianity is to be poor. Not at all. There's no special virtue in being poor, and no happiness in having a constant struggle to make ends meet. But Christianity does plead for two things. One, it pleads for the realization that it is never in the power of things, of possessions, to bring happiness. And the second thing, it pleads for the concentration upon the things which are permanent, the things that a man can take with him when in the end he dies." Guess what? We can take something with us when we die. It isn't money, it isn't possessions, it isn't anything tangible, it is something greater. It is the contentment we find in God. It is that godliness. We can be content to the day we leave this earth, and contentment then can follow us into eternal life. So who's the richest person on earth? The person who doesn't need anything except God. Think about Dr. Kent Brantley, who's now in a hospital recovering from Ebola. Why would he join Samaritan's Purse and work as a medical missionary in Liberia? Why does somebody do something like that? godliness. Listen to this report from USA Today posted just a couple of days ago.
In October, Amber and the kids and I are moving to Monrovia, Liberia.
This is the voice this past July of Dr. Kent Brantley.
For 2 years, we will live and work and serve among a people who, until the last 10 years of peace, had known nothing but the violence and devastation of war for the previous 20 years.
3 months before leaving for Liberia, he told the Southeastern Church of Christ in Indianapolis why. He spoke of his longtime interest in missionary work and a previous mission trip to East Africa in college. He said he had no previous connection to Liberia and no concerns about risk.
I knew nothing about Liberia. So how is it that less than a year later, I'll be taking my family to this far-off place? It's because God has a call on my life.
The words Ebola, sickness, danger, never mentioned.
When you connect the dots, you see a grand picture that God has used to draw my life in a certain direction. God is good.
In the sermon that he gave before he left, the week before he left, he said, God did not give us a spirit of timidity. He was quoting Paul, of all things. And of course, most people looking at that video would say Dr. Brantley's crazy. I say he is content in the will of God. Dr. Brantley has discovered how to be richly contented. Ask him if he's rich as he lies in a hospital with a disease that has no cure, and I believe he will tell you that he's one of the richest people on earth. Why? Well, Paul answers that question as he continues in 1 Timothy. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. The things we need, food and clothing, not the things we want, the things we need. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. I know people who have no money who are desperately in love with it. I also know people who have lots of money and who could care less about it. What's the difference? Having money? No. It's the position of the heart, not the possession of the hand. Again, contentment isn't something that we're born with. It is something that we have to learn. It's something that we have to practice and apply in our lives. Contentment isn't natural. It is something that we learn as we grow older. It's something that we have to work on. It's not easy. Lust for money brings trouble and nothing but trouble. Going down that path, some lose their footing in the faith completely and live to regret it bitterly ever after. Think about Dave Chappelle. I have an answer for Dave Chappelle, and it can be found in only one place. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Jesus tells us that is the sum of all the commandments. If you take care of that, all the 10 commandments fall into place. The same thing is true of money. If you don't love money, you aren't going to cater to the people who have it. You aren't going to cling to it. You're not going to find your security in it. You're not going to seek it first. You aren't going to build your life around it. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. When you do that, you truly will be richly contented.